Hey guys, Yips here, coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about Nzoth the Corruptor on Heroic difficulty as a Destro Warlock. Destro is really strong in this boss fight. Your cooldowns can have a big impact on how well the pull goes for your guild. You're able to do a ton of Psychus damage, a ton of Corruptor Tentacle damage, as well as perform decently in the last phase of the boss fight. So there are 3 phases on the boss. There's the Psychus phase, there's the Tentacle phase, and there's the last phase. As a Destro lock, you need to play for your guild. Your guild is going to need certain amount of damage at certain times, depending on how powerful your guild is, depending how much damage your guild does. And you're going to need to work around that as being a Destro lock. That means using your cooldowns on adds if you have to, you saving your cooldowns for Psychus if you have to, or holding your cooldowns even for the little boss damage that you get after your group comes up from Psychus. So think about what your guild needs on this boss fight a lot as a Destro lock, and that is going to heavily impact your cooldown timings. My cooldown timings on this boss are fairly specific. I always CD on pull, I always CD on Psychus on pull, do a lot of damage to him, and then go in on Nzoth afterwards with the end of my Infernals. However, sometimes you'll want to be in saving your Infernal cooldown for this particular boss damage phase. It sort of depends on what your guild needs, so keep that in mind as I go through this kill guide. After this phase, you're going to be going into your first Tentacle Phase, and the idea that you want to be going through on the Tentacle Phase is Havoc early and often, and also get out as many immolates as you can for flashpoint and increased shard regen, so you're able to spam out those heavy damage dealing chaos bolts. So you'll see as soon as we go into this Tentacle Phase, I'll be cataclysming on top of a Basher tentacle. Typically other tentacles also spawn on top of the Basher, meaning that you get additional immolate target value, giving you more shard gen for that first Havoc window, allowing you to spam chaos bolts. So here you see the Corruptor Tentacle spawn on top of the Basher, I Havoc, I have a lot of shards, I'm going in with Chaos Bolt. Immediately after that Havoc window, you're going to see me spamming Immolates on all of the targets. This is just because Immolate is your highest damage dealing ability outside of Chaos Bolt, and it will also generate you shard gens for Chaos Bolts, so it's just a really high value global to be using on all of these targets. The next time your Havoc window comes back up, use it as soon as it's back up. Depending on your guild's DPS, you might get 2 in this particular phase. Here I'm only getting about 1.5, which isn't the best, but still it is some additional value. Immediately after this, I'm going to be going into the Psychus phase, so that is why I'm using my neck right now. However, that being said, sometimes Destro locks don't even go down for the Psychus phase. Sometimes they stay up and only do tentacle damage, and this is why your cooldown timings may be different than mine. Here, you might be cooldowning adds, you might be saving them for the second set of adds. Think about it yourself for your guild. So here we're going downstairs, and the idea here that you want to focus on is doing synapse damage until Psychus has a lot of stacks, and then once Psychus has a lot of stacks, you want to be using Havoc to deal increased damage to an exposed synapse and do a ton of DPS overall. So you see here, we quickly burn down that first synapse, and now I'm going to be focusing on getting a lot of immolates out for increased shard gen, attacking synapses to get Psychus his damage stack, and then using my cooldowns once he has 2 to 3 stacks in order to burst him down from whatever percent health he is to 0. So right now he's at 2 stacks, and I'm going to be starting to go in on him. I pop my Infernals. I have around 6 seconds left on my Havoc window, and I'm going to be looking to Havoc a tentacle that is going to die to give the boss his 4th stack. So I'm already starting to generate my Supremacy stacks. I'm doing a lot of damage. We mark the next Skull Kill marker. I Havoc it, and you see my Chaos Bolt here are going to be hitting this tentacle for a lot of damage because Psychus is also taking increased damage. He goes up to 4 stacks. This allows me to do a lot of single target. Now in this phase, depending on your guild, your damage and your cooldown timings are going to vary a lot. If your guild isn't doing as much damage, you see Psychus still has 75 energy left before he actually wipes the group. That means you have a lot of time left before he's actually going to need to die. A lot of guilds won't kill him until he's 90, 95 energy, and this means you're going to be using your Infernal cooldown a lot later than I am and focus on doing a lot more tentacle damage early on than I would. So you need to be thinking about that as you're going through the boss. The timings for you may not be pop your Infernal on 2 stacks, it may be pop it on 3 stacks, or in some cases it may be even pop it on 1 stack and just focus on using that damage to kill tentacles to allow your other classes to do more damage on Psychus himself. So after that phase, you don't go down for Psychus anymore. You already had your 2 Psychus phases. Now you're just going to be doing Tentacle Phases. And on Tentacle Phases, again, the same ideas follow. You're going to be using your Cataclysm early, your Havoc early, getting a lot of Immolates out, and doing as much damage you can to the Basher and the Corruptor Tentacle. It's also important to note that it's really important to be attacking Nzoth even when he's immune to DPS overall. And you may be thinking, why is it important to attack Nzoth even when he's immune to damage? If you're running the Infinite Stars trait, you can still proc Infinite Stars on the boss, even when you're not attacking anything. So after these tentacles die and you're transitioning to the next point, you'll always be seeing me attacking Nzoth in order to proc my Infinite Stars, so when we do go into the last phase, and he's taking increased DPS, or not increased DPS, but he's able to take DPS, you have those stacks pre-ramped and you're able to do more damage overall. So again, this phase was very similar to the last Tentacle phase. I got a lot of Immolates out, I got a really nice Havoc window, and I was able to do a lot of DPS. So now you'll see I'll be attacking Nzoth, I'll be ramping my Infinite Stars on him. You see I just got another stack there, I just got to 7 stacks as opposed to if I was at 6, and I will pop my second cooldown of Infernals on this first Tentacle spawn. So I pretty much pop Infernals on cooldown whenever a new ad set comes up. So if my Infernals are off cooldown and a new ad set is coming up, that is when I will use them. However, that being said, if you have a bunch of mages in your group, if you have a bunch of other Destro locks in their group, and they're also using their cooldowns at the same time you are, you might be losing overall value on them because the ads will just be dying so quickly. However, if you are in a guild where your damage isn't as high, that might not be the case, so you'll have to play it by ear when you want to be using your cooldowns. By using my Infernals here, I guarantee that they'll be up for the last phase, which is good. I'll get 1 set of cooldowns in the last phase with Bloodlust. I'll be using that, trying to get a damage amp if I can, and that will be my cooldown usage for the boss fight. On pull, Psychus, 1 set of Tentacles, last phase. You get 4 sets of cooldowns on this boss fight. And again, you can see the same idea here. I pop my Cataclysm on this guy. After my Cataclysm, I cast 1 more Immolate, Havoc, go into my Chaos Bolt window with a lot of damage, and then after that Chaos Bolt window is over, I go and I immolate every other target. It's the same thing, rinse and repeat every time. Get a lot of immolates out, get your Havoc window off with a lot of Chaos Bolts, and you'll do really good damage in this phase. You'll note that I don't really care too much about my corruption level after the first time I go down. So the first time I go down, I make sure I'm at 100 corruption, so I don't get MC'd in the down phase, but after that, I don't care too much about my corruption level. I'll actually even sometimes soak a little bit of these puddles if I'm too high on corruption. The reason being is your corruption level, your insanity level, you can control it in this last phase. You choose when it goes down. There's nothing that the boss will do that forces you to lose corruption, meaning I get to control when I go mind controlled and deal 100% increased damage, and being on lower sanity lets me do that more easily. If I was on 100 sanity, it would almost be impossible for me to get MC'd in this last phase without taking unhealable amounts of damage. So being on lower amounts of sanity just makes it a little bit easier to go insane. So in this last phase, you're just doing generic 2-target cleave Destro work on the Thought Harvester while focusing down the boss. If your group's damage isn't as high, you might need to focus the Thought Harvester so you don't have so many of them up at the same time. Sort of depends on what your guild needs, but right now I'm just saving my cooldowns for Bloodlust. Our group Bloodlust, when the second set of Psychus guys cooldowns comes back up, so that's roughly 2 minutes after the boss phases. Can be a little bit less, sometimes it's 1.5 minutes, it's a minute depending on when they cool down downstairs. So you'll see here, this is when we're lusting probably about 30 to 40 seconds after the boss actually spawned, and this is where I'm using my Infernal set. The boss is basically dead at this point for us. Our lust will burn him from 40 to 0 pretty easily, especially with players getting mind controlled. Here I'm kind of splitting off from the group a little bit because I know I'm going to get MC'd in a second, so it doesn't really matter where I'm standing. So the mind grass comes out, I move away, I get sucked in, and I'm going to control this suck in, so I end up hitting a puddle, get MC'd, do a bunch of damage to the boss, and then I kill myself at the very end so the group doesn't have to deal with me being mind controlled. So here I get myself mind controlled, and I'm just going to go into the boss fight, do a lot of damage to the boss as much as I can, and make sure that I'm ticking myself so I'm a little bit lower on HP, so when that MC buff actually ends up fading on me, I can actually end up killing myself. So you see here, I have 5 seconds left on my mind control, and as soon as it gets down to 2 seconds, I'm just going to run into the puddle and die. That's just the efficient way to do it. If I was to let that MC buff expire on me, I would start casting on my group, and that's not good. And that's generally how you want to play the fight. I know for a lot of people that your kills aren't going to look quite the same as that. You're probably going to have a lot longer of a last phase. You're probably going to spend a lot more time on Psychus and dealing with that. So that's why, again, I highly emphasize, guys, make sure that you learn your specific cooldown timings. You can copy what I do on this boss fight. It's fine. However, for your guild and your guild's specific needs, you might need to be doing something different. Anyways, hope this helped you guys on the fight a little bit. Hopefully this helped you learn how to do a little bit more damage on Psychus and on Nzoth. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.